Every family has a script. Not a written one. Nobody sits down and explains it, it just exists, passed through the air of 1,000 ordinary moments. Through what gets praised and what gets ignored. Through the look on a parent's face when you say the wrong thing. Through the stories told at dinner about cousins who did well and cousins who didn't. Through the silences that form around certain choices and the warmth that follows certain others. The script says things like, you will study this, you will marry someone like this, you will live near enough to visit, you will call on Sundays, you will not embarrass us, you will want what we wanted for you, and you will be grateful for the wanting. Most people follow the script. Not because they were forced to, but because the cost of not following it is hard to calculate in advance and easy to feel once it arrives. The cooling, the worry dressed as disappointment, the family member who brings it up at every gathering as if the conversation was never quite finished, the sense that you are loved, yes, but conditionally, that the warmth has terms attached that nobody ever wrote down. And then there are people who stop following it. Mostly quietly, without a dramatic announcement. They just begin making choices that belong to them rather than to the script. A different career, a different kind of relationship, a different city, a different life than the one that was quietly assumed for them. And the family feels it immediately. Even before anything is said, something has shifted. Someone has stepped outside the structure. And the structure, which held its shape for so long, doesn't quite know what to do with the space that's left. The person who made the choice is often surprised by how much that space costs. Not just in family terms, inside themselves. Because the script was never just external. It lived in them too, and walking away from it is never as clean as it looks from a distance. Jung would look at this person and see someone in the middle of one of the most demanding psychological tasks a human being can undertake. Not climbing a mountain, not building something, just becoming, slowly and at great personal cost, a self that is genuinely their own. He called this individuation. The long and often uncomfortable process of separating what you actually are from what you were shaped to be. And he understood that the family is where that shaping begins. Before language, before memory, before there is any ability to question what is being absorbed. The family installs something deep. A set of values, expectations, and emotional reflexes that feel, for a very long time, indistinguishable from the self. So when a person begins to pull away from family expectations, it rarely feels like freedom at first. It feels like wrongness. Like a low and persistent discomfort that doesn't have a clean name. Because the expectations being refused are not just outside them, they are woven into how they think about themselves. What they deserve, what success looks like, what love is supposed to feel like. Pulling on that thread doesn't just change the relationship with the family. It changes the relationship with everything they thought they knew about who they were. Jung would also notice what gets activated in the person who refuses. The guilt that arrives without being invited, the dream that brings the parent's face, the moment of achievement that is immediately followed by a strange and sourceless sadness. These are not signs of weakness, they are signs of how deep the original shaping went. How much of the inner world was built inside that particular structure. He would say that the person who stops caring about family expectations is not rejecting their family. They are trying to find out what is actually theirs and what they would choose if choice had always been fully available to them. That is not rebellion, that is one of the quietest and most necessary things a person can do. And it is almost never finished. There is a story that families tell about themselves, and inside that story, loyalty is everything. Loyalty to the values that were passed down, to the path that was quietly assumed, to the idea that what the family wanted for you was wanted out of love, and that love deserves to be honored in the way love asks to be honored. It is a powerful story. And it is not entirely wrong. There is love in it, real love often. But Nietzsche would ask what else is in it. What is being protected beneath the love, what the story would look like if you removed the warmth and looked at the structure underneath. Because family expectations are not neutral. They carry the weight of everything the family believes about the world. About what is safe and what is dangerous. About what constitutes a good life and what constitutes a wasted one. About who is respectable and who has gone astray. Those beliefs were formed somewhere, in a particular time, a particular place, a particular set of circumstances that may have nothing to do with the life the person standing in front of them is actually living. Nietzsche would say that what gets called tradition is often just fear that has been given a more dignified name. The fear of the unknown, of the path not taken, of the child who becomes someone the parent can no longer fully read or predict or claim as a reflection of themselves. And when someone steps outside the family script, that fear surfaces. But it rarely arrives as fear, it arrives dressed as concern, as disappointment, as the quiet withdrawal of approval that is never quite explained but is always felt. The story says this person has failed something, has broken something, has chosen themselves over the people who gave them everything. Nietzsche would look at that framing very carefully, and he would ask whose values are actually being served. And whether the person who walked away from the script did so out of selfishness or out of something much closer to honesty. The story rarely asks that question. It doesn't need to, as it already has its answer. Fromm would say that the family is the first and most powerful system of belonging a human being ever enters. And that belonging, as Fromm understood it deeply and wrote about carefully, is never simply warm. It is also structural, it has shape, it has edges. And those edges become visible the moment someone steps outside them. Fromm wrote about the fear of freedom as one of the most underestimated forces in human life. The idea that separating from a structure, even a limiting one, even one that doesn't fit, produces a particular kind of anxiety that has nothing to do with the specific choice being made. It is the anxiety of standing outside the system that first told you who you were. Of losing the reflection that the family provided. Of becoming, suddenly and uncomfortably, someone who has to define themselves without the familiar walls holding the shape in place. Fromm would say that the family feels this too. When someone stops honoring the quiet contract, the family doesn't just feel disappointed. It feels destabilized because the person who leaves the script was also a part of how the family understood itself. Their compliance was a kind of mirror. And when the mirror changes, the reflection changes with it. The family has to look at itself differently, and that is rarely comfortable. So the pressure that follows is not always conscious, and Fromm would be very clear about that. It doesn't arrive as manipulation usually. It arrives as worry, as repeated gentle questions about whether this is really what they want. As stories about others who made similar choices and struggled. As a warmth that is still present but has developed a faint and permanent condition attached to it. Fromm called this kind of love symbiotic. Not freely given. Quietly transactional, maintained as long as the other person remains within the shape the relationship was built around. And the person who has stopped caring about family expectations finds themselves navigating exactly that. Not hostility, something quieter and in many ways harder to name or resist. Just love, with its terms showing. Freud would begin as he almost always did, not with the present moment but with the one that came long before it. Because what family expectations do to a person who stops honoring them, cannot be understood without looking at what those expectations did long before the refusal ever arrived. Freud understood that the family is not just a social unit, it is a psychological one. The first relationships a person ever has. The ones that teach them, before they have any ability to question the lesson, what love feels like, what approval feels like, what happens when they disappoint the people they need most. Those lessons don't stay in childhood. They travel forward, they sit underneath adult decisions in ways that are rarely visible and almost never simple. So when a person stops caring about family expectations, Freud would say that something complicated begins to move inside them. Not just relief, not just clarity. Something older and less comfortable than either of those things. The internalized voice of the parent that has lived inside them for so long it no longer sounds like anyone else. It just sounds like conscience, like guilt, like the persistent sense that something has been broken that may not be fixable. Freud would also look carefully at what the refusal costs in the body. The tension that arrives before a family gathering, the exhaustion that follows certain conversations, the dreams that process what the waking mind tries to set aside. These are not dramatic symptoms. They are the quiet evidence of a conflict that has no clean resolution. Because the family that installed the expectations is not an abstract institution. It is the people who were there at the beginning, and that beginning never entirely loses its weight. What this does over time is create a split that Freud would recognize immediately. The outer person who has made their choice, who is living their own life, who has stepped outside the script with both eyes open. And the inner one who is still in some very old and very quiet place, waiting to be told that it was all right to do so. That permission, Freud would say, is the one that almost never comes. And learning to live without it is its own long and private piece of work.